Illegal now, but normal in 1970s. The 1970s were a time of freedom and risk. Things that seemed totally normal back then are now illegal. Kids bought cigarettes for their parents, played with dangerous toys, and even rode in cars without seatbelts. What changed? From lawn darts to leaded gasoline, many everyday things we took for granted are now banned. Let's take a look at some of the wild, risky activities from the 70s that would get you in trouble today. Playing on railroad tracks. Decades ago, many kids viewed railroad tracks as an adventure waiting to happen. Walking the rails, balancing on the steel beams, and taking shortcuts across train yards were common activities. Some kids even placed pennies on the tracks to see them flatten under passing trains, completely unaware of the dangers. There were fewer restrictions, and the general attitude toward railway safety was much more relaxed. However, times have changed. Today, railroad companies enforce strict trespassing laws, and safety campaigns warn against the severe dangers of playing near train tracks. Modern trains are faster, quieter, and take much longer to stop, making them far more dangerous than most people realize. Organizations like Operation Lifesaver work to educate the public about railway safety. What was once an innocent childhood pastime is now recognized as a life-threatening risk, with hefty fines and serious legal consequences for trespassing. Red dye number 2. Back in the 1970s, a major health scare erupted over a food additive known as red dye number. Second studies at the time suggested a possible link between the dye and health risks, sparking widespread public concern. As a result, the U.S. banned red dye number 2 in 1976. But here's where it gets interesting. Mars, Incorporated, the company behind M&Ms, had never actually used that specific dye in their red candies. Instead, they used red number 40, a completely different coloring agent that wasn't under scrutiny. Despite this, the fear and confusion surrounding artificial dyes led Mars to make a surprising decision. They pulled red M&Ms from production entirely in 1976, not because they had to, but because they wanted to avoid alarming customers. For over a decade, M&M lovers had to settle for the other colors in the bag until red M&Ms finally made a comeback in 1987. By then, food dyes had been reevaluated, and red number 40 was considered safe for consumption. It's a perfect example of how public perception, even when not entirely based on fact, can shape corporate decisions and consumer products in unexpected ways. Drinking age of 18. In the 1970s, if you were 18, you could vote, serve in the military, and in many states, legally buy a drink. The push to lower the drinking age gained momentum after the 26th Amendment was ratified in 1971, lowering the voting age from 21 to 18. The argument was simple. If young adults were mature enough to vote and be drafted into war, they should be trusted with alcohol. Many states agreed, and by the mid-1970s, the legal drinking age had been lowered to 18, 19, or 20 in most of the country. However, this change came with serious consequences. Fatal drunk driving accidents surged, particularly among teenagers and young adults. Studies showed that alcohol played a role in more than 60% of traffic deaths, with a significant portion of those fatalities occurring among drivers aged 16 to 20. Concerned about rising numbers, lawmakers took action. In 1984, Congress passed the National Minimum Drinking Age Act, which pressured states to raise the drinking age back to 21 by threatening to cut federal highway funding. One by one, states complied, and by 1988, all 50 states had adopted the higher drinking age. Today, it's hard to imagine a time when 18-year-olds could legally grab a beer, but for a brief period in the 70s, that was the norm. Flame retardants in the 70s. In the 1970s, flame retardants were everywhere. They were added to pajamas, furniture, and even baby clothes to prevent fires. At the time, it seemed like a smart idea. After all, keeping kids and families safe from fire hazards was a priority. But what people didn't realize was the hidden danger. These chemicals didn't just stay on the surface. They were absorbed through the skin, and over time, studies began to link them to a range of health problems, including hormone disruption and even cancer. As the years went by, concerns over the safety of these chemicals grew, leading to stricter regulations and the eventual banning of many flame retardants in the 2000s. However, the damage had already been done. Older furniture, particularly pieces from the 70s and 80s, still contains high levels of these harmful chemicals. In fact, if you own vintage furniture or clothing from that era, there's a chance you're still in contact with those chemicals, even though they've been banned. When kids could buy cigarettes. In the 1970s, smoking was so common it became a relic of the past. What's something from the 1970s that you think should have never been banned? Child labor. In the 1970s, it wasn't unusual to see children working, especially in agriculture, family businesses, or lower-income households. Many parents believed that having a job at a young age built character, taught responsibility, and prepared kids for adulthood. Paper routes, farm work, and small retail jobs were considered normal ways for children to contribute financially. In some cases, kids worked long hours in physically demanding conditions, sometimes at the expense of their education. While the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, had been in place since 1938, child labor laws remained relatively lax, particularly in industries like farming, where children could legally work under certain conditions. The dangers of child labor, including exposure to hazardous machinery, toxic chemicals, and exhausting work hours, raised concerns among lawmakers and advocacy groups. In 1976, the Child Labor Amendment was introduced in an effort to provide stronger protections against exploitation, but it wasn't until 1989 that real change gained momentum. That year, the United Nations adopted the Convention on the Rights of the Child, emphasizing the importance of education over employment. The U.S. eventually tightened regulations under the FLSA, making it illegal for children to work in hazardous conditions. Clackers. If you were a kid in the 1970s, chances are you remember Clackers, the toy that was as thrilling as it was dangerous. Made of two heavy acrylic balls attached to a string, the goal was to swing them up and down as fast as possible, making them collide with a loud clack. The faster you went, the more impressive the sound and the more skill it took to keep them going. But there was a catch. If you lost control, those hard plastic balls could smack you right in the face, or worse, shatter into flying shards. It didn't take long for schools and parents to catch on. Reports of injuries and broken clacker balls led to widespread bans in schools across the country. But, as with any forbidden toy, that only made them more popular. Kids kept playing with them, finding ways to sneak them onto playgrounds and challenge their friends to see who could keep their clackers going the longest. Eventually, safety concerns forced manufacturers to redesign them with softer materials, but for those who grew up in the 70s, the original clackers remain a wild and unforgettable piece of childhood nostalgia. Cyclamates. In the 1960s, cyclamates were everywhere. This artificial sweetener was the go-to ingredient for diet sodas, sugar-free treats, and even some processed foods. It was 30 times sweeter than sugar, had no calories, and was considered a game-changer for those looking to cut back on sugar. One of the most famous sodas of the era, Tab, relied on cyclamates to achieve its signature taste. But in 1969, everything changed. Concerns arose that cyclamates might be linked to cancer after a study found that extremely high doses caused bladder tumors in lab rats. This led the U.S. to ban the sweetener in 1969, officially removing it from the market in 1970. In response, companies quickly pivoted, replacing Cyclamates with saccharin, another artificial sweetener that had its own share of controversy. Interestingly, while the U.S. took a hard stance, many other countries never followed suit. Today, cyclamates remain legal in places like Canada and Europe, and later studies have questioned whether the original cancer concerns were valid. Still, the ban was never reversed in the U.S., making cyclamates a relic of the past in American food and drink. Cigarette advertising on TV. Back in the 1970s, cigarette advertising was impossible to escape. Everywhere you looked, TV commercials, glossy magazine spreads, towering billboards, there were images of rugged cowboys, stylish socialites, and smooth-talking actors making smoking look effortlessly cool. The Marlboro Man and Joe Camel became household names, and catchy slogans stuck in people's minds. Tobacco companies weren't just selling cigarettes, they were selling a lifestyle. But growing health concerns about smoking led to a major crackdown. In 1971, the U.S. government banned cigarette ads from TV and radio, marking a huge shift in tobacco marketing. That didn't stop the industry, though. It simply adapted. Instead of commercials, cigarette brands flooded magazines, plastered their logos on race cars and sporting events, and even slipped their products into Hollywood movies. The ban may have pushed tobacco off the airwaves, but it didn't stop cigarettes from remaining a dominant part of pop culture. It wasn't until decades later that stricter regulations on advertising and sponsorships made a dent in Big Tobacco's influence. Smoking on airplanes. Flying in the 1970s was a completely different experience from what we know today. Step onto a plane, and you'd be greeted not just by flight attendants in stylish uniforms, but also by the thick haze of cigarette smoke lingering in the cabin. Airlines had so-called smoking and non-smoking sections. But in reality, the smoke didn't care about the seating chart. It drifted everywhere. Whether you were a smoker or not, you were breathing it in. For the entire flight, for years, this was just an accepted part of air travel. Passengers casually lit up mid-flight, ashtrays were built into every armrest, and cigarette smoke mixed with the scent of jet fuel and in-flight meals. But, as the dangers of secondhand smoke became harder to ignore, pressure mounted to change the rules. The first step came in 1988, when smoking was banned on short domestic flights in the U.S. Over the next decade, restrictions tightened until, in 2000, smoking was completely outlawed on all U.S. flights. Please comment 1 to let me know you'll be watching this video until the end. Lead paint. In the 1970s, lead-based paint was as common as shag carpets and wood-paneled walls. It covered everything: homes, schools, playground equipment, even children's toys and cribs. Bright, durable, and long-lasting, it seemed like the perfect choice for decorating and protecting surfaces. But beneath its convenience lurked a dangerous secret. As research into lead poisoning grew, the risks became impossible to ignore. Children exposed to lead dust or chipped paint suffered severe health problems, including developmental delays, learning disabilities, and even organ damage. The shocking reality prompted the U.S. government to take action, and in 1978, lead-based paint was banned for residential use. But by then, millions of homes were already coated in it, and many still are today. Even now, homeowners and renovators must be cautious. Disturbing old paint can release toxic lead dust into the air. It's wild to think that something once considered safe and standard was actually poisoning people for decades. The story of lead paint is a stark reminder that just because something is widely used doesn't mean it's harmless. Lawn darts. In the 1970s, lawn darts were a backyard staple. Families and friends would gather outside, taking turns hurling large metal-tipped darts toward a circular target on the grass. The game seemed innocent enough, like horseshoes, but with high-flying projectiles. However, the reality was far more dangerous. These darts weren't lightweight toys. They were heavy and sharp enough to pierce the ground, and unfortunately, sometimes people. A misplaced throw or a distracted child wandering into the game zone could result in serious injuries and, tragically, even fatalities. For years, warnings piled up, but the game remained wildly popular. It wasn't until the late 1980s, after multiple severe accidents, that the U.S. government finally banned lawn darts altogether. Today, a safer version exists with blunt, weighted tips, but for those who played with the originals, the thrill wasn't just about hitting the target, it was about dodging incoming darts. It's shocking to think that such a dangerous toy was once a normal part of summer fun. But back then, a little risk was just part of childhood. Drunk driving with high BAC limits. In the 1970s, drinking and driving were shockingly common, and legal blood alcohol concentration BAC limits were far more lenient than today. Many states allowed drivers to get behind the wheel with a BAC of 0.10% or even higher, well above the current national standard of 0.08%. In some places, law enforcement took a relaxed approach, often letting intoxicated drivers off with a warning or a suggestion to drive safely. Alcohol-fueled parties, bars, and even corporate events often ended with people confidently driving home despite having had several drinks. Many believed they could handle their liquor, and the social stigma surrounding drunk driving was minimal. It wasn't until the late 1970s and early 1980s that the tide began to turn. A major turning point came in 1980 when Mothers Against Drunk Driving, ADD, was founded after a grieving mother lost her child to a drunk driver. MAD and other advocacy groups fought hard for stricter DUI laws, public awareness campaigns, and tougher enforcement. By the mid-1980s, most states had lowered the legal BAC limit to 0.08%, and drunk driving began to be seen as a serious crime rather than just bad judgment. Minimal airline security. In the 1970s, air travel was remarkably relaxed compared to today. There were no long security lines, no X-ray screenings, and no need to remove shoes or limit liquids. Passengers could walk straight to the gate with family and friends, and cockpit doors remained unlocked mid-flight. However, this lax security came at a cost. Hijackings surged, with over 200 incidents recorded in 1972 alone. Some were politically motivated, while others involved ransom demands. Despite this, major security overhauls were slow to take effect. The devastating attacks of September 11th, 2001 changed everything. The Aviation and Transportation Security Act led to the creation of the TSA, ushering in strict security measures, including baggage screenings, reinforced cockpit doors, and passenger screening protocols that continue to evolve today. Leaded gasoline. In the 1970s, pulling up to a gas station meant choosing between regular or premium, not unleaded or leaded. Nearly every pump dispensed leaded gasoline, a fuel additive that had been used for decades to boost engine performance and reduce knocking. Drivers loved it, and car manufacturers built engines to take advantage of it. But what people didn't realize at the time was that every trip to the pump was also contributing to a serious public health crisis. As cars burned leaded fuel, they released toxic lead particles into the air. These pollutants weren't just bad for the environment, they were harmful to human health, especially for children. Studies began linking lead exposure to developmental delays, brain damage, and behavioral issues, prompting growing concern among scientists and policymakers. By the mid-1970s, the U.S. government took action, mandating a gradual phase-out of leaded gasoline. At first, there was pushback. Many believed unleaded fuel would harm car engines and old habits die hard. But by the 1990s, leaded gasoline had mostly disappeared, marking the end of an era. High school smoking areas. It's hard to imagine now, but in the 1970s, many high schools actually had designated smoking areas for students. Yes, teenagers could legally light up between classes, often in a specific courtyard or section of the school grounds. Smoking was so ingrained in everyday life that schools saw it as better to regulate the habit than try to eliminate it. After all, plenty of teachers smoked too, sometimes even at their desks or in the teacher's lounge, with a cigarette in hand. The Easy Bake Oven. In the 1970s, the Easy Bake Oven was every kid's dream toy, a miniature kitchen appliance that let children bake real cakes and cookies using just a tiny light bulb. But that seemingly harmless incandescent bulb got incredibly hot, often reaching temperatures over 350 degrees Fahrenheit, 175 degrees Celsius. While kids were excited to whip up their tiny treats, they also ran the risk of serious burns if they accidentally touched the interior. At the time, safety standards weren't as strict as they are today, and parents largely accepted minor burns as part of childhood. But as reports of injuries increased, concerns grew. Children's fingers could get trapped inside the oven, and, in some cases, kids suffered second-degree burns. By the early 2000s, changes were made, and modern Easy Bake Ovens replaced the traditional light bulb with safer enclosed heating elements that provide controlled warmth without the risk of direct contact. For those who grew up in the 70s, the original Easy Bake Oven brings back fond memories of mixing batter and waiting eagerly for a tiny cake to finish baking. But looking back, it's wild to think a toy oven once posed such a serious burn risk. Lax Seatbelt Laws. In the 1970s, seatbelt use was more of a personal choice than a safety requirement. Many cars, especially older models, didn't even come with seatbelts in the back seats, and if they did, people often ignored them. It was common to see kids moving freely around the car, sitting on the armrests, or even standing on the back seat during long drives. The idea of buckling up just wasn't a priority. At the time, many drivers believed seatbelts were restrictive, uncomfortable, or even unnecessary. Some even thought they could be dangerous in certain accidents, fearing they might get trapped inside a wrecked car. Because of this, compliance remained low, even after safety campaigns pushed for change. It wasn't until 1984 that New York became the first state to enact a mandatory seatbelt law, and even then, many people resisted. Over time, more states followed, and by the 1990s, seatbelt laws became the norm. Today, studies from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, confirm that seatbelts reduce the risk of death by 45% for front seat passengers and up to 60% for backseat passengers. Looking back, it's shocking to think how casual people once were about a life-saving device we now take for granted. Minimal child car seat regulations. Back in the 1970s, child car seat laws were practically non-existent. Most parents relied on standard seat belts to keep their children secure, and many didn't even do that. It was common to see kids bouncing around the back seat, lying across the bench, or even standing up while the car was in motion. Some parents placed babies in makeshift carriers or simply held them in their laps, believing that their grip alone would keep them safe in an accident. At the time, car seats existed, but they were designed more for convenience than safety. Many models were simply booster seats that helped kids sit higher so they could see out the window. There were no strict crash testing standards, and very few parents considered car seats essential. It wasn't until a groundbreaking 1985 study by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, revealed that car crashes were the leading cause of death for children aged 1 to 4 that attitudes began to change. Today, every state has laws mandating child safety seats, and studies show that properly used car seats reduce fatal injury risk by 54% for toddlers and 71% for infants in passenger cars. Owning exotic pets without permits. In the 1970s, keeping exotic pets like iguanas, macaws, and even boa constrictors was surprisingly common and largely unregulated. Unlike today, when permits and strict guidelines are in place, back then, people could walk into a pet store and buy a monkey, a parrot, or even a big cat without much scrutiny. As the exotic pet trade grew, so did concerns about public safety, animal welfare, and ecological impact. Escaped or abandoned pets sometimes became invasive species, while others posed serious risks to their owners and communities. In response, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service introduced regulations in 1980 to curb the trade and protect both animals and humans. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, most states had enacted laws requiring permits, ownership documentation, and stricter care standards. Despite these regulations, a 2013 Association of Zoos and Aquariums report estimated that over 50,000 exotic pets were still being kept in the U.S. without proper permits before enforcement efforts intensified. Selling unpasteurized milk. In the 1970s, raw milk was widely available and sought after for its creamy texture and supposed health benefits. Farmers and small dairies sold it directly to consumers, often without restrictions. However, concerns over foodborne illnesses linked to unpasteurized dairy, such as Salmonella, E. coli, and Listeria, led to increased scrutiny. By the 1980s, health officials warned against raw milk consumption due to outbreaks of serious infections. In 1987, the FDA mandated pasteurization for all interstate milk sales, and individual states began enforcing stricter regulations. Today, raw milk remains controversial, with some states allowing sales under specific conditions, while others ban it outright. Candy cigarettes. Back in the 1970s, candy cigarettes were a childhood staple. Sold in every corner store, these sugary sticks were designed to mimic real cigarettes, complete with white paper wrapping and a red tip to resemble a burning ember. Some even had a puff of powdered sugar that created a cloud of smoke when kids blew on them. It was all part of the fun, pretending to be just like the grown-ups, mimicking the way they held, flicked, and smoked their candy cigs. At the time, most parents didn't think twice about it. Smoking was everywhere, on TV, in restaurants, even in airplanes, so it wasn't surprising that kids wanted to imitate adults. But as awareness of smoking's health risks grew, concerns about candy cigarettes followed. Critics argued that they normalized smoking for children, potentially leading them toward the real thing later in life. By the late 20th century, bans and packaging changes followed, with many countries restricting their sale or rebranding them as candy sticks without the cigarette-like design. Today, it's hard to imagine a candy so closely tied to smoking being widely sold to kids, but in the 70s, it was just another treat in the candy aisle. 20 things from the 1960s, once necessary, now completely obsolete. The 1960s were packed with innovations that shaped the world, but many items once essential have disappeared. Ever wondered what happened to them? Join us as we explore 20 things from the 60s that were once must-haves, now lost to time.
What are you listening to? This Remco transistor radio.
Party line telephones. In the 1960s, party line telephones were a lifeline for many, especially in small towns and rural areas where private phone lines were too expensive or unavailable. Instead of each home having its own dedicated connection, multiple households shared the same telephone line. When someone picked up the receiver, they could hear if a neighbor was already using the phone. To make a call, you had to wait until the line was free, which sometimes led to frustration, especially in emergencies.
Because party line service is a shared service, it is all the more important that its users understand what they need to do to get full benefit from it.
While party lines were cost-effective, they came with major drawbacks. Privacy was a luxury you didn't have. Eavesdropping was common, whether intentional or not, and gossip often spread quickly. Arguments over phone usage weren't unusual, particularly in larger families or between neighbors who needed the line at the same time. Each household had its own distinct ring pattern, so people knew when a call was for them. But that didn't always stop others from answering out of curiosity. By the late 20th century, advances in telecommunications, including the expansion of private phone lines, rendered party lines obsolete. As phone service became more affordable, families embraced the convenience of having their own dedicated connection, marking the end of an era where the telephone was as much a shared community experience as it was a personal one. Glass milk bottles. Glass milk bottles were a staple in households across America. Every morning, milkmen made their rounds, delivering fresh milk right to the doorstep. These bottles, often embossed with the dairy's logo, were not just containers. They were part of a well-organized, environmentally friendly system. Once empty, families would rinse them out and leave them outside for the milkmen to collect, ensuring they were cleaned, refilled, and reused. This sustainable cycle meant far less waste compared to today's single-use plastic containers. Glass bottles kept milk fresh, but they weren't without drawbacks. They were heavier than modern alternatives and prone to breaking if dropped. In winter, milk left outside could freeze and expand, sometimes pushing the cream right up through the cardboard cap. Despite these quirks, many still fondly remember the taste of milk from a glass bottle, often said to be richer and colder than milk stored in plastic. By the late 20th century, changing lifestyles and new packaging materials led to the decline of the glass milk bottle. Supermarkets replaced home delivery, and lightweight plastic jugs and cartons became the norm. Though rare today, glass milk bottles remain a nostalgic symbol of a simpler, more sustainable era. Zippered pencil cases for slide rules. Zippered pencil cases for slide rules were an essential part of the toolkit for students, engineers, and scientists in the mid-20th century. During the era when slide rules were a primary tool for performing calculations, having a well-organized protective case was crucial. These sturdy, zippered cases were designed to keep everything in its place, ensuring that the slide rule, a delicate and precise instrument, remained safe from damage. These cases typically featured multiple compartments, offering ample space for not just the slide rule itself, but also other important items like pencils, erasers, and drafting instruments. Some cases even had a dedicated pouch specifically for the slide rule, protecting it from scratches and keeping it ready for use. The sleek, practical design of these cases reflected the meticulousness required in the field of precision calculation. They were more than just a storage solution. They were an essential part of the slide rule user's daily life, combining organization with protection. While the advent of electronic calculators in the 1970s rendered the slide rule largely obsolete, these zippered pencil cases remain a nostalgic reminder of an era when careful measurement and manual calculations were essential in nearly every technical field. Today, they are a symbol of a time when people valued precision, organization, and the tools that allowed them to achieve it. Vinyl record cleaners. Vinyl record cleaners were once an indispensable tool for music lovers and audiophiles alike. As LPs became the primary medium for music in the mid-20th century, maintaining them in pristine condition became crucial for enjoying the full, rich sound that vinyl had to offer. These cleaners, which came in various forms, brushes, cloths, and even specialized cleaning fluids, helped remove dust, dirt, and other debris that could interfere with the listening experience. A clean record ensured smoother playback, minimized surface noise, and preserved the high-quality sound that made vinyl so beloved. However, as technology progressed, the rise of digital music gradually shifted the landscape. The convenience of streaming services and digital downloads made the care and maintenance of vinyl records less of a priority for many. While vinyl has seen a resurgence in recent years, it's primarily driven by nostalgia and the appeal of physical collections rather than necessity. As a result, the specialized tools and cleaners once essential for keeping LPs in top condition have become largely obsolete, replaced by more convenient digital formats. Carousel slide projectors. The carousel slide projector was once the go-to device for capturing and sharing memories, bringing families together for a visual journey through photos. Introduced in 1961 by Kodak, this innovative device featured a rotating tray, or carousel, which allowed users to load multiple slides at once, each slide inserted upside down and backwards. This clever design eliminated the need for constant manual changes of individual slides, making it easier for users to enjoy a seamless viewing experience. Before the carousel projector, viewing slides was a labor-intensive process. Each slide had to be carefully inserted into the projector, one by one, and often had to be flipped or repositioned for proper viewing. The Kodak carousel revolutionized the process by allowing for a continuous, automated show. With the push of a button, the carousel would rotate, and the slides would automatically advance in sync with the narrative. This made it the perfect tool for family gatherings, vacations, and special occasions where parents could proudly showcase their photographic efforts, often to the delight of friends and family. However, with the advent of digital photography in the late 20th century, the carousel slide projector gradually faded into obscurity. Digital cameras and smartphones made capturing, storing, and sharing images much more convenient, while digital projectors and computer screens provided new ways to view and share photos. As a result, the need for physical slides and the labor-intensive process of preparing a carousel show became a thing of the past. Tube televisions. Tube televisions, also known as cathode ray tube (CRT) TVs, were once the heart of living rooms everywhere. These bulky, boxy sets dominated households for much of the 20th century, providing families with their main source of entertainment. The CRT technology worked by firing electrons onto a phosphorescent screen, which would then light up to create images. While the picture quality of CRTs was far from perfect, they provided a level of entertainment and connection to the world that was groundbreaking for their time. However, as technology evolved, the once reliable CRT began to show its age. Sleek, flat panel displays, powered by LCD, LED, and later OLED technology, revolutionized the way we watched television. These modern screens offered thinner profiles, better picture quality, more vibrant colors, and were far more energy efficient. As flat panel displays grew in popularity and affordability, CRTs quickly became obsolete. Today, these old tube televisions are rarely seen in homes, replaced by much more advanced technology that continues to shape the way we consume media. However, for many, the memory of those heavy tube sets will always hold a nostalgic charm. Home barometers. Home barometers, often crafted from wood and glass, were once a staple in households, especially in the 19th and early 20th centuries. These beautifully designed instruments served a practical purpose, helping families predict changes in the weather. By measuring air pressure, barometers provided a reliable indication of whether a storm was on the horizon or if sunny weather was in store. When the needle pointed to a certain spot, It was like a personal weather forecast right in your home, allowing people to prepare for rain, snow, or clear skies. However, as technology advanced, these charming devices gradually became obsolete. With the rise of modern weather forecasting techniques, barometers were no longer necessary for predicting the weather. Today, accurate forecasts are available instantly via television, radio, and most commonly, smartphone apps. Can you think of any other once essential gadgets that have faded into history? Phone books. Not too long ago, phone books were an essential part of every home, a heavy, indispensable tome that served as a vital resource for finding contact information. Each year, these bulky books were delivered to homes, filled with names, addresses, and phone numbers of nearly everyone in town. Whether you were looking to get in touch with a friend, a local business, or a service provider, the phone book was the go-to tool. People relied on it daily, flipping through its pages to track down the information they needed. It wasn't just a practical tool, it was also a social one, as flipping through the book often brought back memories of old friends, neighbors, or distant relatives. However, with the rise of smartphones, the internet, and digital directories, the phone book has become largely obsolete. Today, we can search for phone numbers in an instant with a few taps or clicks, making those heavy books a thing of the past. TV antennas. TV antennas were once a familiar and indispensable part of the home, especially in the pre-cable era. These large metallic structures, often perched on rooftops or mounted on poles, played a crucial role in delivering television signals. With the twist of a dial or the flick of a switch, families could tune in to broadcasts from distant towers, capturing the latest news, entertainment, and shows. Whether it was the latest primetime drama or the big game, the antenna ensured that homes stayed connected to the world of television, even in the days when choices were limited to just a few channels. With the introduction of cable TV, satellite dishes, and eventually digital streaming services, the bulky metal antennas became obsolete. Today, most homes use compact digital antennas, or even more commonly, rely on subscription-based services like cable or streaming platforms for their entertainment. While the once ubiquitous rooftop antenna is no longer a fixture in modern homes, its presence still lingers in the memories of a simpler time, a reminder of the days when tuning into the evening news or Saturday cartoons involved a bit more effort and a lot more static. Punch cards. In the early days of computing, punch cards were the backbone of data storage and processing. Made of stiff paper, these rectangular cards featured a grid of tiny holes, each precisely punched to represent specific characters or commands. They were commonly known as IBM cards, as the company played a significant role in their widespread adoption. Businesses, universities, and government agencies relied on them for everything from payroll processing to scientific calculations. Using punch cards required patience and precision. Each program or dataset had to be carefully encoded, with a single misplaced hole potentially causing an error. Large-scale computing projects often required stacks upon stacks of these cards. Some programs used thousands, stored in neatly organized trays. Losing or misordering them could mean hours of painstaking work to restore proper sequencing. By the 1970s, advancements in storage technology, such as magnetic tape and disk drives, rendered punch cards obsolete. These newer methods allowed for faster, more efficient data entry and retrieval. Reel-to-reel tape recorders. In the 1960s and 1970s, reel-to-reel tape recorders were the gold standard for high-fidelity audio recording. Used by professionals and enthusiasts alike, these machines featured two large reels, one holding the supply reel of magnetic tape and the other winding it up as it played or recorded. Unlike the compact cassette tapes that followed, reel-to-reel systems offered superior sound quality. making them a favorite for musicians, radio stations, and audiophiles seeking rich, detailed recordings. By the late 20th century, more practical formats like compact cassettes, CDs, and eventually digital recordings made reel-to-reel systems largely obsolete. While they disappeared from mainstream use, they remain highly valued among collectors and audio purists who appreciate their warm, analog sound and historical significance in the evolution of recorded media. Transistor radios. Unlike bulky tube radios of previous decades, these pocket-sized devices were lightweight, battery-powered, and highly portable. Whether at the beach, on road trips, or simply walking down the street, people could now take their favorite stations wherever they went. Brands like Sony, Zenith, and RCA led the market, producing stylish, affordable models in a variety of colors. Teenagers in particular embraced transistor radios, using them to tune into the latest rock and roll hits from stations like WABC and KFWB. For many, this little device represented freedom. No longer tied to the family radio in the living room, they could enjoy music on their own terms. Though transistor radios remained popular for decades, the rise of cassette players, CDs, and later digital music gradually overshadowed them. Today, while smartphones and streaming services dominate portable audio, transistor radios are still sold, valued for their simplicity and reliability, especially during emergencies. Home movie film reels. Capturing family memories meant using film reels. Home movies weren't just quick recordings, they were carefully planned events. Families gathered with their Super 8 or 16mm cameras to document birthdays, vacations, and everyday life. These reels preserved moments in rich, grainy detail, giving a warm and nostalgic quality to the footage. But filming wasn't as simple as pressing a button. Loading the camera with film required precision, and recording time was limited. Once a reel was full, it had to be developed, which could take days or even weeks. Viewing the footage was an event in itself. Families would set up a projector, dim the lights, and watch their memories flicker on a pull-down screen or a blank wall. The rhythmic clicking of the projector and the occasional reel jam were all part of the experience. However, film reels required proper handling and storage. Exposure to heat or moisture could damage the film, and projectors needed regular maintenance. As technology advanced, home video shifted toward VHS tapes, camcorders, and eventually digital formats, making film reels a thing of the past. Film strip projectors. Film strip projectors were a staple in classrooms, libraries, and training sessions. These devices brought lessons to life, bridging the gap between traditional lectures and visual storytelling. A film strip was a long strip of sequential images, often paired with an audio recording on a separate cassette or vinyl record. The teacher or presenter would advance the frames manually in sync with the narration, creating an engaging, step-by-step learning experience. Film strip projectors were widely used for subjects like history, science, and language arts. Students would gather in dimly lit rooms as colorful images flickered onto a screen, making lessons feel more interactive than textbook reading alone. Whether it was a documentary on space exploration or an illustrated folktale, film strips helped bring subjects to life in a way that print materials couldn't. Despite their effectiveness, film strip projectors had limitations. The reels could jam, the bulb could burn out, and keeping the narration perfectly timed required some skill. As video technology improved, film strips were gradually phased out in favor of VHS tapes, DVDs, and eventually digital presentations. Slide rules. Before electronic calculators became widely available, slide rules were the go-to tool for engineers, scientists, and students tackling complex calculations. These ingenious mechanical devices used logarithmic scales to simplify multiplication, division, exponents, and even trigonometry. With a simple sliding motion, users could quickly compute answers with impressive accuracy, though a strong understanding of mathematics was still required to interpret results correctly. For those in technical fields, mastering the slide rule was essential. Engineers used them to design bridges and spacecraft, while students relied on them for exams and coursework. Even NASA's Apollo program depended on slide rules for critical calculations. Compact and reliable, they required no batteries or power, making them a trusted companion for professionals and academics alike. However, by the early 1970s, portable electronic calculators revolutionized computation. These new devices provided instant, precise answers without the need for manual adjustments. As prices dropped, calculators quickly replaced slide rules in schools and workplaces. Which item from the 60s do you miss the most, and why? Glass milk bottles, party line telephones, punch cards, manual typewriters. Other. Please leave your answer in the comments below. Manual typewriters. This mechanical marvel used a system of keys and hammers to imprint ink onto paper, producing neat and professional-looking documents. The rhythmic click-clack sound of each keystroke became the soundtrack of the era, familiar to anyone who worked in an office or wrote letters at home. Typing on these machines required precision and a certain skill, as the speed of your work was determined by how well you could manage the keys, without the convenience of backspace or autocorrect. For many, the manual typewriter was a symbol of productivity. In the workplace, secretaries, writers, and journalists used them for everything from correspondence to reports. At home, people typed everything from school papers to personal letters. The touch of a well-maintained typewriter felt smooth and satisfying, with each letter created by a firm press of the key. By the 1970s, electric typewriters began to make their way into homes and offices, offering automatic return and easier typing. However, by the 1990s, the rise of personal computers and word processing software led to the eventual decline of the typewriter. Adding machines. These mechanical devices were built specifically for calculating sums, especially when dealing with finances. Unlike simple calculators, adding machines were designed to handle more complex tasks, such as adding columns of numbers, and they did so with incredible precision, particularly when it came to dollars and cents. Each key pressed would register a number, and the machine would ring or click to signal the total, often printing out a paper tape to keep a record of the transaction. Before the advent of electronic devices, adding machines were used extensively by accountants, cashiers, and office workers. They were especially important in bookkeeping, helping to ensure accuracy in financial records. With their sturdy mechanical construction, these machines were reliable and could last for decades with proper maintenance. They often had a satisfying, rhythmic clicking sound as they worked through the numbers. However, as the 1970s and 1980s brought electronic calculators and personal computers into the office, adding machines became less relevant. These new technologies could perform calculations more quickly and with greater functionality. By the late 20th century, adding machines had largely disappeared from most workplaces. Do you have a favorite memory tied to any of these vintage items? Share it with us. Steel ice cube trays. Made from sturdy stainless steel, these trays were known for their durability and reliability. Each tray featured a lever mechanism that made popping out the ice cubes effortless. After filling the tray with water, you'd simply pull the lever, which would crack the ice, allowing the cubes to slide out easily. The satisfying clink as the ice cubes hit the bottom of the sink or a glass was a common sound in many homes. Steel ice cube trays were built to last, with their solid construction making them far more durable than their plastic counterparts. While they were efficient and dependable, there was one small challenge. If you overfilled the tray or didn't twist the lever just right, the cubes could become stuck or break apart. Despite this minor inconvenience, the ease of use and high quality made these trays a must-have kitchen tool for many years. By the 1990s, silicone ice cube trays began to replace their steel predecessors. Silicone allowed for easier removal of ice cubes without the need for a lever, and its flexibility made it far less prone to damage. Portable phonographs. These beautifully crafted devices, often encased in wood or leather, were the pinnacle of audio technology for their time. The phonograph's portability allowed people to take their favorite records to picnics, family gatherings, and even outdoor events, transforming any setting into a musical celebration. Unlike today's sleek digital players, portable phonographs required a bit of effort to operate. They typically needed to be assembled before use, and many models included a hand crank to wind up the mechanism and get the turntable spinning. However, as technology progressed, portable phonographs slowly became obsolete. The rise of more compact, user-friendly devices like radios and cassette players, followed by the advent of wireless Bluetooth speakers and streaming services, made the portable phonograph a relic of the past. Kodak Brownie Camera. The Kodak Brownie camera, first introduced in 1900, played a pivotal role in transforming the way people captured memories. Before its arrival, photography was reserved for the wealthy, requiring expensive equipment and technical knowledge. The Brownie broke down these barriers by being both affordable and incredibly simple to use. With its box-shaped design, the Brownie was lightweight, compact, and preloaded with film, making it accessible to the masses. For the first time, everyday people could snap photos of family moments, vacations, and everyday life without needing to be a professional photographer. The last Brownie cameras were produced in the 1980s, marking the end of an era for this iconic device. With the rise of digital cameras and more advanced film technologies, the Brownie became obsolete. Despite this, the Brownie's influence is undeniable. It laid the foundation for modern snapshot photography and democratized the ability to capture life's most precious memories, a legacy that lives on in today's smartphones and digital cameras. Digital alarm clocks. In the past, digital alarm clocks were a staple on bedside tables, offering a dependable solution to waking up on time for work, school, or appointments. They were often designed with simple, easy-to-read displays and sleek, modern designs that became part of the decor. Some even came with extra features like radio tuners or the ability to set multiple alarms, making them even more versatile. However, with the rise of smartphones, the need for standalone digital alarm clocks has rapidly declined. Smartphones, with their all-in-one functionality, now serve as alarms, as well as clocks, and so much more. As we rely more on our devices for nearly everything, from checking the time to managing our schedules, digital alarm clocks have faded into the background, a relic of a time when waking up meant relying on a separate piece of technology. While many may still use them as a backup or for nostalgic reasons, today's smartphones have made these once ubiquitous clocks largely obsolete. Sewing patterns. Sewing patterns were once a cornerstone of home fashion, especially in the mid-20th century. For many, they were the key to crafting personalized, one-of-a-kind garments, allowing individuals to express creativity and style. These patterns, often printed on tissue paper or lightweight cardboard, came with detailed instructions and illustrations that made sewing accessible to both seasoned seamstresses and beginners alike. Each pattern was a map, guiding the maker step by step, from cutting fabric to assembling a finished piece. During the 1960s, these patterns were a gateway to fashionable, tailored clothing. They featured classic designs with sharp silhouettes, like pencil skirts, A-line dresses, and structured jackets that defined the era's style. Many of the vintage patterns from that time offered a glimpse into the past, with designs that reflected the changing social and cultural landscape. Think mod fashions, elegant evening wear, and the iconic shift dress. Makers could choose from a wide variety of options, from formal attire to everyday basics, and then add their personal touch, whether it was fabric choice, custom embroidery, or innovative modifications. However, as technology evolved, so did the fashion industry. With the rise of ready-to-wear clothing and digital design tools, sewing patterns became less common for everyday garment creation. Mass production made it easier and cheaper to buy clothing than to make it by hand. Despite this, vintage sewing patterns continue to hold a special place in the hearts of collectors, designers, and nostalgic fashion lovers. Today, while fewer people may use patterns to create their own clothes, the legacy of sewing patterns remains, reminding us of a time when the process of making something with your hands was as important as the finished product. Times have changed, and so have the rules. What once felt normal is now a thing of the past. Did we miss anything? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, check out more videos in this series. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Who remembers? With friends who'd love a dose of nostalgia. Thanks for watching.